So far, I've made 3 videos in total covering up how to use HDRP in Unity or the high definition render pipeline, and I feel like one vital part is still missing out of those series of videos, which is what scene settings are and how you can use them. So in this video, we're gonna check out scene settings and do some cool things like adding a skybox in HDRP. If you have any questions about HDRP or want to see more videos like this out of HDRP, make sure to comment down below asking your questions and stating what you want to see next, and also join our Discord server where you can chat to over 12,000 game developers and be a part of a huge community that loves to help out, share their projects, and keep up to date on news. Also, this video is brought to you by Synty Studios. Synty is the studio that publishes amazing assets on the Unity Asset Store, and they are the ones who published the very popular series of asset packs called Polygon. And as you know, Unity is now hosting a mega sale on the Asset Store, and a bunch of Synty's assets are a part of that sale. Most of their assets have been deducted by 50% in price, which is huge, and they're all incredible packs that are highly usable in various types of games, as the models are well optimized and each pack contains lots and lots of content. If you wish to check out more of Synty Studios and see what assets of theirs are in the sale, make sure to go to the link in the description. Now, with that being said, get Unity ready because we are diving right in. Alright, so here we have Unity open, and I'm using Unity 2019.1 full version, so the first full version. Just for your information, it's not really important, but I just still want to mention that. And so, as you can see, in this scene that I have open right here, by the way, the assets I'm using for this video are also going to be linked to the description box of this video. The scene I have here looks good, but we don't have a skybox. It's completely gray in the scene view and it's blue in the game window for that matter. And also, as you can see, the shadows are really dark, like they're pitch black. So overall, it doesn't really look good, especially if we look at this house right here. And this is often going to happen if you create a new project using HDRP and then create a new scene. This might happen to you. So how do we solve this? Now, basically, in the built-in render pipeline, if we go to Window and then go into Rendering, Lighting Settings, in here you will have to pick like a skybox, and you can assign the sun, which is normally the direction of light you have in your scene. But when you're using HDRP, these settings, or those settings rather, are kind of like taken out of this menu here. So in HDRP, we no longer use the lighting window for that kind of work, but instead we go to Game Object, go all the way down to Rendering, and pick to create a new Scene Settings game object. And now we can see that we have a skybox, not the best skybox in the world, but at least a default one. We can also see that if I disable and enable this game object again, you can see that the shadows are no longer pitch black, but they do have kind of like affection from the ambient light in the scene. But to just give you like a quick overlook of this, if you didn't watch the post-processing video and you don't know how the volume component works, weight is basically going to allow you to transition between how much this is going to affect your scene. And speaking of affection, the isGlobal trigger, or this boolean itself, right, the checkbox, is going to enable if this is going to be affected in just one part of the world, or if it's going to be globally affecting the entire scene. And normally, because this is a scene settings volume component, it's pretty normal and casual to have it enabled for isGlobal, because it's supposed to be affecting the whole scene. And priority, you can basically, if you have two different or multiple even volume components in your scene, you can pick the priority in order to sort the layer of different volumes. And finally, we also have the profile, so you can create a new profile or even clone this, or even pick something by clicking this little circle here. But we're not going to use a profile, which is basically a preset, because instead we're actually going to create something of our own. So when you create scene settings, by default, you're going to have 4 different subcomponents, or overrides as they're actually called, the formal term for it. You're gonna have 4 of them assigned to this game object. And these 4 are the shadows, visual environment, procedural sky, and finally exponential fog. And you can unfold these and see all of these settings we have in here. So for instance, max distance in shadows, we can decrease this to play around with how far out are the shadows going to reach out in the scene. Normally this value is at 500, which is a pretty good value to keep it at. And of course, below shadows, course, we have something called visual environment. And now in here, this is going to be very important if you guys want to switch the fog settings for your scene from exponential to volumetric. For instance, under the fog setting, you can set the type from exponential to volumetric or linear, or maybe even none. And on top of that, we can also pick the ambient mode and change it to either from static to dynamic or vice versa. And we also have the type of sky we want to have. So by default, it's going to be set to procedural sky, but you can switch it over to HDRI sky or even a gradient sky. And you can of course pick to have no skybox at all. But normally I just keep it at procedural. And because we're using procedural sky by default, it's also adding a override for the procedural sky. So if we enable this, you can see that we have enable sun disk, which is the sun itself right here. So for instance, if I remove this tick here, you can see that the sun and the halo around it is disappearing, but obviously the light is still affecting the scene. And we can re-enable this and then play around with like the sun size and make it incredibly huge, or rather very small like this. And we can play with more settings like how much the halo is affecting the outer world. And we can also set how thick the atmosphere is going to be. Now, when you're creating the scene settings game object, if you already have a directional light in your scene, it's automatically going to assign that directional light as the sun disk. So now I'm just rotating the directional light and you can see that the sun disk itself is also following. Now, below all of these overrides, we have the final one, exponential fog. And this is basically the fog itself in the scene. So if we play around with the density, you can see that the fog is going to decrease and increase. And this is also going to affect your shadows. So it is good to have it enabled. And of course, you can also play around with the distance and the base height and all these other values. So it's totally customizable and you don't have to use the default values. Now, something that is very important in my opinion to note here is if we click on add override, obviously on top of everything else that is by default added into this component, you can add new overrides or new subcomponents, like you can add some post-processing, lighting, fog, exposure, diffusion, profile override, sky, shadowing, and all this kind of good stuff, right? And what's important that I want to note here is, remember when I was talking about the priority? So let's say we want to add post-processing into our scene like I did in my last tutorial. By the way, link in the description if you guys want to check it out. So we could click add override and then go into post-processing and pick something in here. Like let's say we're gonna add some bloom, right? And we can enable all these settings and increase the intensity to be like something crazy, right? Now the thing is, I don't recommend having post-processing in the same volume component as the scene settings, because specifically speaking, if we add bloom here and like let's say some other post-processing, and then we have a room in our scene where it's going to be a little bit more like specific to that kind of room, like in the interior of this house, right? Well, then the scene settings component here would not really work out well, because we have, first and foremost, we have checked is global. So this is going to affect the whole scene, so we can't really do anything specific to that room. And number two, we cannot play around with the priority either. So even if we have a scene settings component like this, we can have its priority set to be 0 and then have something specifically for that room where we say priority is equal to 1, which basically means that the room post-processing is going to prioritize over the global scene settings, which means that it's going to override it. So just keep that in mind in case you guys work on something with HDRP, because that was something that I learned the hard way. I had to like transfer all my post-processing to a new game object. So, you know, fun time. But yeah, so that is pretty much how the scene settings work in Unity. This is kind of like a short tutorial on how it's supposed to work and what you're supposed to do and not and stuff like that. So if you guys want to see more HDRP kind of tutorials, you can always let me know in the comments, and also join our Discord server by going to the link in the description, or by simply going to discord.gg/polyrealm, because we're, like I said in the intro of this video, I think we're at 12,000 members at this point. I never know the numbers, so don't ask me. But yeah, we're like an incredibly big community at this point of game developers who are all like-minded, like to chat, like to meme, a lot of memes, just so you know, have fun and all this good stuff, and share progress of their projects and help people or ask for help and stuff like that. So if you want to become a part of that community, it's completely free. So go to the link in the description or discord.gg/polyrealm. So yeah, that should give you an overview of how HDRP and scene settings and volume component work. If you guys enjoyed this video and want to see more, make sure to give this video a thumbs up to show some support, and hit the subscribe button below the video to stay up to tune for new content, because we're gonna have a bunch of new graphics and HDRP and even lightweight render pipeline actually tutorials, and Unity tutorials in general and stuff like that. So basically there's gonna be a lot of videos you guys are probably gonna enjoy if you enjoyed this one, so make sure to subscribe. And I'm going to be super active in the comment section and in our Discord server. So once again, if you have any questions or if you have any video suggestions on what you want to see next and stuff like that, if you have a feature that I should make a video on, let me know in the comments, and join our Discord server once again to actually chat with me and everybody else in this community. And I would also like to give a huge thank you to all of our Patreons for all their support: Richard Stance, Cupola, Flu Joey, Glassville Entertainment, Couch Ferret, Buter Die, academyofgames.com, Terrorift.com, John Funnel Grid, Andreas Brillin, Samuel Rivello, and InfinityPBR.com. Thanks to your support on Patreon, I'm able to make more videos. Alright, so with that being said, I'm once again going to be super active in the comment section and in our Discord, so I hope to see you guys there. So thank you so much for watching, and have a good night.